But we begin on Capitol Hill, where there will be a very high-profile hearing soon on the Trump administration's coronavirus response. This comes, of course, as many states start reopening despite a huge surge in cases and in hospitalizations. And in about an hour, the country's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, is set to testify before a House committee. Top officials from the CDC, the FDA, and the Department of Health and Human Services will also join him. Millions of Americans have been diagnosed with the virus, and the numbers are stark. 120,000 people nationwide have died. Lawmakers are looking for answers on whether a rise in cases is caused by more testing, as President Trump claimed in his rally in Tulsa over the weekend. Now, the White House, after the president made those remarks, Anne-Marie, says that he was just joking when he suggested officials slow down testing because of the rise in positive cases. Well, before he left for Arizona, our Weijia Jiang asked President Trump about that. She asked him if he was kidding when he claimed in Tulsa that he requested for the testing to slow down. The president telling Weijia, "I never kid." So for more on this, let's bring in Nancy Cordes. She is following the very latest on Capitol Hill. Nancy, this hearing comes more than a month after these top health officials testified before another congressional committee. The president just now, I think what is really remarkable is about an hour ago, Nancy, when we were probably talking to you about coming on our air, we were going to ask you about the president's remarks and the fact that his administration says that no, the president was kidding in Tulsa. Now, the president confirmed to Weijia, or at least he said to Weijia, that he never kids and that testing is a double-edged sword. And I just kept thinking to myself as I was listening to that, there are many, many times when I don't want to get on the scale in my bathroom. And I say to myself, if I don't get on that scale, I haven't gained any weight. But that's not true. I am still gaining weight, even if I don't happen to get on that scale, and there's no way that I can keep track of my weight and nothing I can do to lose weight if that is my goal, if I don't know how much I weigh. So what can we expect today from those lawmakers after the president's remarks this morning?
Well, Vlad, first of all, I don't think you have anything to worry about. But
exactly.
You look great. But I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I see where you're going with this. And the reality is that, of course, the increase in testing alone is not, does not fully explain the spikes in cases that we see around the country. We know that from the numbers. If you look at states like Florida, for example, we know that the rate of positives has gone up even within that testing. So that is something that these health experts are going to be asked about today. And of course, they are going to be asked about these mixed messages from the president and the White House, where the president said he had asked for the testing to be slowed down. White House aides very quickly after he said that were in damage control mode. They said he was only joking. The vice president said that it was an offhand remark. Well, the president had an opportunity to clean it up in an interview yesterday. He didn't. He doubled down. And then, of course, he doubled down with Weijia once again. And that's the reason that this hearing is now taking place against a backdrop of Democrats saying that they want to do an investigation into whether the president did indeed push for testing to be slowed in this country, which would be a major scandal. And you can bet that they're going to ask all four of these members of the president's task force today, point blank, whether they ever heard the president say, maybe we shouldn't be testing so many people.
Another issue that's come up over the past few weeks is just the way in which people are gathering, whether they're gathering to protest in the streets, whether they're showing up at one of the president's rallies, hitting the beaches. Can we expect Fauci and some of the other officials to weigh in on concerns about these large crowds that have increasingly begun to gather over the past few weeks?
Yes, I'm sure they will, because they have in the past. Fauci's been asked about this, and he has said, look, it is not safe to be out in a large crowd right now. If you feel compelled to do it, if you need to protest, at the very least wear a mask. That will go a long way towards protecting you. And so I expect that you'll hear a similar message today. The problem, once again, is that the message being delivered by these health experts differs from the message that you are getting from the White House itself, where you had a number of top White House and campaign officials making a point of the fact that they would not be wearing masks at the president's rally over the weekend. They have declined to wear masks in public time and time again. And so once again, the message that that the Congress is getting, the message that the public is getting from these health experts, from the White House, diverges. And of course, another thing that these experts, Fauci and the director of the CDC and the like, will have to worry about today is the knowledge that the president is usually watching. And if they stray too far from his message, then that can cause a problem. On the plus side, we are going to hear some good news today. The director of the CDC is going to tell lawmakers that the CDC has now developed a test that can screen not just for coronavirus, but also for the 2 different strains of the flu. That streamlines the testing process, tells you if you're sick, hey, maybe you don't have coronavirus, but you do have the flu. So that is a positive development. But Fauci, according to his prepared remarks, is going to tell this committee that we still can't expect to get back to any semblance of normal until there is a vaccine.
Yeah, and it's hard to get back to normal, Nancy. Many lawmakers on both sides of the aisle agree that the economy should reopen because Americans are suffering due to the slowdown in the economy. But when you've got the messaging from the president's task force, like Dr. Fauci, suggesting that at least if we reopen, that everybody should be wearing masks, everybody should be social distancing, and that has become a political wedge issue where people are putting themselves and their lives and the lives of their loved ones at risk because they see the mask as a political issue and not one that is a health issue. That is a serious question, I think, for these lawmakers. And I'm curious to see how Dr. Fauci will answer when people ask him about that. This guidance that has been put out by the coronavirus task force and the unwillingness of some in the administration to actually lead by the example that they're suggesting that everybody should lead by. So that'll be interesting. But I also want to ask you, Nancy, about these police reform bills. House Democrats and Republican senators have both introduced separate legislation. What are you hearing as the latest?
Well, the House is going to vote on the Democratic legislation on Thursday. That's the plan, and because Democrats control the House, that bill is expected to pass, even if it doesn't get any Republican support. So we'll have to see what happens if they're able to pick up any GOP backing. Nevertheless, they will have the votes to pass the bill. In the Senate, things are a little dicier. There's a Republican plan, as you know, put forth by Tim Scott. Republicans say it's more realistic. It puts more power in the hands of states and local governments. Democrats argue that the bill is a watered-down version of their reform bill. And Democrats are going to have to make a big decision. They're going to have to decide whether some or all of them vote just to move to that bill. The process works differently in the Senate, and Democrats can block this bill from ever getting a vote. But that's a risky maneuver. That will allow Republicans to say that Democrats are trying to stand in the way of reform. And so Democrats are still trying to decide what they're going to do, Vlad and Anne Marie, and so that's a bit of a drama that's percolating here on Capitol Hill. Whether they will even allow a debate on this Republican policing reform bill, if they don't allow it, then it kind of stops this process dead in its tracks in the Senate, and it's hard to see where things would go from there.
All right, Nancy Cordes, thank you so much, Nancy.
You're welcome.